Hi, in this video, we are going to explain why we need a vacuum chamber to fill in cartridges. Here we have some sample foams that we had previously taken out of cartridges. As you know, cartridge foams used to be larger in the past, and therefore, it was easier to refill an ink cartridge. However, recently ink cartridges, especially the color ones, have become smaller. In other words, while a black cartridge has a foam as big as this one, the same size split it into 3 parts and used in color cartridges for each corresponding color. Therefore, it has become harder to make a successful refill. And due to the existence of air bubbles in a cartridge foam, problems have emerged such as failing in retrieving all 3 colors. In other words, cyan, magenta and yellow ink do not come out simultaneously, or cease in printing after several printouts. Let's have a look at how these problems emerge in an ink cartridge. As you see in the chart, there is so much air inside the foam. And, as there are countless tissues in a cartridge foam, air bubbles are placed in these tiny tissues. If we fill an ink cartridge by syringe or digital refill machines, it is impossible to place all the ink into the entire cartridge foam. In other words, air is left at the corners of the cartridge, or especially at the printhead and nozzle plate. And because of the gravity, ink attempts to go down while the air attempts to go up. This results in a blockage inside the cartridge. Therefore, you might receive complaints from your refill customers, such as, one or more colors do not come out of printhead, it prints well at the beginning but it stops after several printouts, ink dripping into the printer, or missing lines on the printed sheet and etc. Let me explain this briefly. Suppose this as the nozzle plate of an ink cartridge. As ink drops down throughout the nozzle plate, it makes a pretty good printing on the sheet for the first few pages. The main reason of such problems is, there is ink and air just above of it. When we refill in the atmospheric pressure or without vacuum, it is impossible to displace the air with the ink, and because refilling doesn't take place under vacuum as shown in the chart, there are tiny air bubbles left inside the cartridge. And because of this reason, air attempts to go up, and ink attempts to drop down. This results in a blockage inside the cartridge. In other words, air becomes like a barrier, not to let the ink come down. And this problem can be solved only if the cartridge is filled under vacuum. As mentioned before, if a cartridge is filled under vacuum, there will be no air bubbles left inside the cartridge. And therefore, you can print the cartridge until it runs out of ink. And there happens no problem in the nozzle plate. If you refill without vacuum, and push the ink to the cartridge, there will be air bubbles left inside. And therefore, you will not be able to use the cartridge effectively, and use all the ink inside. Let me show you one more thing. We have 2 sample cartridge foams here. Normally, foam should absorb the liquids quickly, however, in cartridge foams, tissues are too small and therefore, it cannot absorb thoroughly. And as you can see, it does not sink either. Therefore, although you refill several times, because the air is not displaced, you cannot fill the entire foam. However, in our vacuum chambers, used in the MIS Pro Deluxe, and all other MIS ink refill machines, we use the following technique. MIS ink refill machines first vacuum the air inside the chamber, while stretching the tissues of the foam physically, and then the ink is transferred. In this technique, there is left no air bubbles inside the foam, and the entire capacity can be filled with ink. In this technique, as you can see, foam does not drip unlike the other foam. Because, in the second foam, there are air bubbles and therefore, it cannot absorb the liquid thoroughly. We can also test this with our digital scale. When we weigh both of them, while the first foam weighs 9 grains, the other foam filled with our technique weighs 12 grains, which makes a 3 grains difference. Furthermore, you can easily see the air bubbles on the foam, with naked eye from the shade. In a cartridge filled without vacuum, ink finishes very quickly. On the other hand, in a cartridge filled under vacuum, it takes much more to finish the entire ink. In other words, with the same shape and volume, our technique produces more ink capacity in a cartridge. In the next video, we will show you how MIS ink refill machines take the advantage of vacuum filling technique to refill ink cartridges.